Let me know when everyone's got it and is ready.
I do not think that I have gotten it yet. Oh, there it is. Sorry.
Is anyone not
ready?
I'm still not ready. I'm just downloading it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. It's just hard to tell online.
No, I feel you.
Yeah.
I'm good when everybody else is.
All right, yeah, I'm good.
So everyone, yes? Okay. The United States voting compulsory advantage one is populism. American populism is on the rise. COVID and economic stagnation are money 686 when colonists say the U.S. call those opposition minorities, the media, the public of the democratic society, and count populism around links to protect popular oxidation from populism, for to Trump, opposition, review, restrictions, formatting, opposition, to tension, populism, opposition, all time will come back from honor, employment, and I reject the next couple few populism, and people against that, the president of the freedom, democratic party will have to start well. Well, considers him like populism a bright feature and defeat of U.S. populism spills over would have an international impact. Freshman 619, a change of 12 of us, a change of public defeat of Trump, particularly have global implications. Inspiration, national public including the government of Hungary, Poland, radical right, and France, Germany, able to of not solely to Trump with the very 2.50 spots like the whole work and almost campaign. The rest of the few populists will not disappear. The conflict and maybe reject my votes to never guarantee the populists will go twice to the end. The populist leaders will kill global climate action, denialism, oversimplification, and cooperation. Callahan 212 taking on populism, put the complexity of the issue, which is clinical when determining the prognosis, populism, the issue of a new and subject policies, 21 right-wing populist party 7, climate change and political emissions, populist leaders of global cooperation essential for climate action to be effective. Populist forces are trying to dismantle multilateral organizations. These groups have that energy progress on climate change. The aggressive pandemic action, we populist and power from like climate denial and action and warming causes extinction. Be reduced over, which we prioritize over any other impact. And also 17 climate change is so that with warming activity, see the next 3 days of the 6 the next level 1 the next 2 close the country for the whole population that the heat circulations can do economic growth. Will come to 21 1 degree C with the current time to be the percentage of by century at the 50 probability reaching 4 degrees C by the end of the century warming up to degrees C is probably about 40 across the whole Pacific and 5 degrees C to 90 40 degrees C will more than the 7 billion of the heat source and 40 degrees C they're both time to burn cut up opportunities possibly being this in the next 5 years to cut up warning addition the failed of suppressing the poor 3 billion up 1.2 degrees C time of the essence. As we cross theory sees as a trigger typical ones spread to up and non-linear change with catchable consequences declining RCF throwing peripheral variation chances that feedback from our initial or piece of stuff with the force multiplier and only compulsory voting solves the counterbalance as populist turnout Maka Poku 6A populist special mode for mobilizing votes mobilizing effective population size of same populist parties from both the whole solution is universal mobilization compulsory voting and peace populist motivation and prompts inclusive for voter participation compulsory voting all of the election is inclusive for parts of the populist mobilization of all the habitual voter mobilization the mobilization of this effective parts of the population and sets more all registered voters get possibility to increase this price will disappear. And advantage 2 is democracy. Voter turnout will reach record lows in 2020. Coronavirus, voter suppression, declining trust in electoral legitimacy. And Dover 528, 35 Americans have helped election Republicans, Democrats, percent voters politically engaged into institutions of the integrity of our lips in the top of person interference, fraud, voter suppression. There are new wars because of polarized long lives, unsafe, self-fulfilled voting, location, absentee balance, fake, false voting, infrastructure that's being half-assed, the perception will take days to get resolved. Will your faith in the system? Whole Americans vote. Republican officials are trying to shape who gets to vote and how. The pockets of margins, giving people to vote, giving people false impression that they're appearing to change the results. Like these, we can make people vote. Most people vote, the more results we ever affect the will of the people, and low voter turnout will trigger a legitimacy crisis and the dissolution of the U.S. government. Gardner 626 supposed to have pandemic the response to the election thoroughly compromising the dissolution of the government, triggering a full blown crisis in the risk of escalation for concerns back to the higher early housing or harder to usually including not be addressed because there's no way to determine who intended to vote. The only way to prove in the election of errors occurred most will state that no entity is not acting uniformly the safety raised by Bush v. Gore. Even though the civil aspect of electoral administration could be content to constitutional scrutiny, the incumbent has worked to more disrupt the electoral process that could return to full-blown regime was minimal funds absent, but it's also fraudulent. The growing Republican Party is just filling one separate the regime legitimacy in favor of attention of power. The rest of the upcoming election of Democratic legitimacy as high of turnout is low and failing democracy ensures China virus 2020 is crucial. Camp 627 season of our situation of COVID if it's Washington expected to go to the democratic system of facing good justice with them soon with the outcome of the situation, but to get back through election use of one school wars, there's a values affected institutions for them to return to studies, digital like goal for the use of the declining leader fall to modern time remains using opportunity of consensus activities using societies, what's the digital contributions, vision international support of even energy suspension to expand political capacity, China exploring more aggressive activities, more and more frequent take for more consistent Washington any aspiration to end China war. China rise causes nuclear war. The U.S. will not accept sharing power. Minimum 817. There's a new that China will become regional head in the U.S. not telling peer competitors to the classification stuff because we're from China economic competition in the United States. China gets you're getting economic competition as well. Security competition in East Asia. Depending on what they've been part of the SCS, Taiwan, and ECS not only have opportunity use China or equal, so we use the U.S. will have to share power sharing power on the things we're going to know to prevent China becoming a peer competitor. Our case is including Dutch Trump has the about Japanese allies. There needs to be American allies put together who's American instructions and China Trump actually odds with the intent and use primacy prevents great power conflict, multipolar revisionism, fragments the global order and causes nuclear war. Branson Edel 19 great power conflict. Circulating with interpreting conflict by president overnight. We so much that I'm use the order for the rights with the great power, the great power, writing a West Park, existing for conflict, Western America, the use of nuclear weapons. The most would make it turn to a great power struggle. Russia does not find a great power, regional powers for the next regional effects, violence, mass deployments in the Middle East. China's emissions are bolder. Chinese military forces flying in fighters against power in the Arctic and South Space in the India. In Africa, Beijing told the CCP that Beijing could take 7 taxes alternative to U.S. leadership at the time, but maybe only the beginning of the major greater industry political provisions have received ancient change from the conflict and war. American should bolster its defenses and only compulsory voting solves the massively increase the turnover of the storage of democratic legitimacy. Moyle 19. In 2018, to the U.S. returned with the highest 100 years as a field, 50% of the state democracy, 50 kind of state hawk in the U.S. The bomb related force between America to be America's level of returns and international scale low. Turnover encourage politicians to design policies cater to the interests of U.S. and the societal vision. The ECU drove these from flawed democracy based on voter engagement. The political rather than the interest of democracy means against just the fact that it's strong and mandatory voting the vote will debate the vote with the election constitution the leaders of the U.S. mandatory voting be a great turnout long come because of errors of voting climate change make up the electorate and framing the standards maximizing sensible being first pleasure pain intrinsically valuable view consistently guard pleasure pain is good reason to action that the pleasure to be intimately valuable for anything more 16 pleasure intrinsically valuable pain intrinsically valuable like the pleasure so the unreal pain by to pleasure pain makes you reasoning experiences every reason plan for not good for everything further pleasure face both reads the line that matters about you. Yeah, that's like 2 seconds left. So I only got through the first Moen card. Cross.
Cool, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right. 3 minutes. Why do the masses desire populism?
I don't understand the question.
Okay, so the 1AC is making a claim that populism is like a huge issue and voters are voting for populist leaders. Why do these voters vote for populist leaders?
Sure. We say that populist leaders are extremely good at getting people who they motivate to actually go to polling places and vote. Even if they're not representative of the entire population, and they use rhetoric, especially in times like COVID-19, to point like ordinary citizens against the like.
Thank you. So the 1AC takes the stance that like these voters are voting against their own interests, and then non-voters are just like losing because of it. Is that the argument?
Not exactly. It's that populist leaders are extremely good at mobilizing turnout and only mandatory voting. And
why are liberal leaders not good at mobilizing turnout?
Sure. There's a couple factors that like block that. People who are, of lower socioeconomic status and of minorities are just less likely to vote. And our evidence is really, I think there's like a couple factors. The app isn't I think the app is just like claims to mobilize those voters. Our evidence is really specific on the question of counterbalance.
Does the 1AC speak for all these voters?
I don't think we speak for all these voters. However, our evidence indicates that if everyone were to vote, populist leaders would not win.
All right. Let's go talk about some of these cards. So the internal link for the first contention is that populist leaders, like if Trump is elected, or if Trump is not elected, then that would spread internationally. Why, if Joe Biden won the presidency, would voters in like the Philippines with populist leaders not vote for populist leaders?
Sure. I think Trump's position of power is extremely large. Being president of the United States has extremely large signification, and because he is a populist leader, it kind of legitimizes other populist regimes. However, we say a defeat of Trump kind of has global implications and delegitimizing populism.
Sure. So, but my question was specifically in regards of a citizen in a different country. Why would they care about Joe Biden winning the presidency?
Sure. As I said before, Trump's presidency is huge global significance.
Okay.
Arguably, the U.S. president has the most power.
That's fine. For the second advantage, what does Joe Biden do to prevent China rise?
Sure. Our evidence our Minimum evidence at the bottom specifically how particularly Trump is very bad at dealing with alliances, which has made escalation of conflict more likely. We don't think Biden would do the same, but also our internal link to the democracy.
Did you make that claim inside of the 1AC?
The what?
Did you make that claim inside of the 1AC? Do you ever talk about like Biden being a good president?
No, I don't think either of our advantages rely on Biden getting reelected. Or Biden getting.
Once voting is enacted, who gets elected for president?
The app isn't. It wouldn't be a populist leader, and our second internal link doesn't depend on who. Is it?
Okay, sure. It's Stephen cases, theory hedge, framing advantage.
Is there an order of the advantages?
Yeah, just top down. Doc assent.
I just realized I was talking while I was muted. It's just downloading.
Okay.
Good, when you are.
Alright, are any of the judges not ready?
I'm
good.
not. I need
What was
to
the
download
order
it.
again?
Yeah, order is 2 on case. We'll start on a quick theory hedge, and then framing, and then advantage. Advantage will be top down.
Okay. Theory hedge, framing. Okay, I'm good.
I'm still downloading. I'm sorry.
Alright, no problem. Don't worry about it.
Alright, I'm good.
I'm about to start. Interpretation, the affirmative manifest specification, democracy, the voting to be compulsory is an indefinite article, the manifest democracy, the that means you have to prove the message in a vacuum, not a predicate in CCC. In an indefinite article, there's something indefinite with using articles that people mix it on another indefinite pronoun for all the members of the class. Democracy is a generic, indefinite, singular, lazy 12. Indefinite singular is going to be generic, existential, taggers on the front line, is reading something general, the existential, interpretation, not daily, so such is not a generic, another doesn't be inserted after the contradiction with minimal change in the posture. The resolution 1, operating with destiny democracy on voting on to be compulsory doesn't apply in a society, voting on to be compulsory because voting may not be compulsory in authority and a communist regime 2, ever tested that democracy voting usually not to be compulsory doesn't substantially change the way that the rest percent not with one predictability people based from the residential system for arguments 2 jurisdiction judges can actually devoted to the right policies specific in the US but for 1 limited permission of 76 different democracies that deep to a different political climates exposed to Afghan control fixed no economics all absolutely for one forcing up and shallow debates with no message directly power with half leverage so losing specificity to deep as an individual get discussion and not extending piece of the app is usually good voters. Fairness, the debate is like activity, the better debate of split education, all the portable skill we take out of the round drop to the better 1. If lost your future piece 2, dropping the arcs ever some marital advocacy lead to 7-6 times given to convene the office committee groups 1 year. Violence arbitrary and based on what you did about it in the best round 2, least the rates of topics if you're not the best no RPNT 1 the logic you should have for being topical always be logical limits for arguments 2. They encourage you to read an abusive after by 3 enable us to return the substance and get education rather divinity the first time. Next off the usage of stake of over good subject desires replicates machine consent arises when the desires of subjects to be directed to the elevated signifier voting and attempt to uniformity they say equal to life in a way that forces individuals to gain recognition of models that exclude them express devious Robinson Tim. They didn't find them overcoding a spotting signification of machine equal statement of particular signifiers elevated the status of standing for the holding other differentials radically suitable for coding resistant to position of meaning arising from the fiction of representation of the word social life and desire operated in a district of they cannot be coded machine limit occurs to desires of the regulatory function despotic signifier no corporate approach to totality these status against desire production desire operative flux and breaks around the state operates so fixed forms and restrict difference if the push it up in the middle of the people into like this brings us to the age old question why did the masses desire fascism, but transcendent truth of the one who see forces individuals to adhere to and infiltrate as conscious desires for complexity to smooth out developing fascism to insert itself to rule the bodies of the target desires. Evans of 13. The fashion known to do they want a fashion matter desires to do something to practice make a practice that people can want fashion the people really to live up to the fashion the way they want what much of what it takes to stick is unconscious subconsciousness comes afterwards. The vast majority of human experience and motivation happens outside of reflective awareness is certainly immediately best by desire that is so equal to determine what desire limited no determination is sublimation the illusion transcendent which comes for all there's not a question of logic. The alternatives to proliferate or actual desires promoting the social relation the state seats of express the illusion and envision a truly revolutionary practice where differences promoted desire no longer misdirected towards fashion. The alt is on condo on a floating pick in 13. No rebellion of the exuded keto better world cycle dare start to the state extended level with the control fixity we should find open the revolution representative that is a great needed against fear as active force counter perceive active fear no wishes to revolutionize subjectivity the conflict revolutionary social movement that falls escape of a desire in open spaces and theories of space of dialogue can be found to counter the opening space of people viewed as a break with the majority control case starting with theory hedge. Reject one or theory point because the 6 times Q people because infant be saying like because I know 3 now you can speed shell level and all response to the average phase apples and C resolvability all to response to the doing our kind of we knew which because the judgment eventually resolve no after these games 8 points by someone see the resolve people negative reaction to stuff is be so negative be said reject paragraph 3 especially gets a huge time skip because a 15-second argument requires half of the 2 hour to match the 3-minute 2 hour collapse and means it's super reciprocal. Now in the framing of utilitarianism 1 death is inevitably heart stops your body decomposes a new life the cycle continues we should not be able to afraid to enter new worlds affect relations. Boom. Death is when a body's enter a new relation that incompatible. Death after all that is inevitable. It is never determined result of the body's encounter with other bodies. Government cause and effect that causes a person enter new relation ties and a body that takes place that things are never presently present in the bodies that things even though death of the body effectually is dying. Death is it's just felt in every feeling experience in life. And for life, it isn't that sense of life. It seeks an appetite, surprise, and emptiness, or zero intensity. Death. Second, the high-tech utilitarianism will reason to care about each of the pain and pleasures because of subconscious desires to achieve it. However, those desires are high-tech with the state you lose your ability to achieve this end. This alters prerequisite to any instance of utilitarian ethics. 3, you're looking to the case of your logic of pain and pleasure being an intrinsic value, and this value tells in the tag of mode is a logical transcendence that they posit the an a priori boundary like good or bad. This logic influences a subconscious layer that's evidence and read evidence and is proof that they posit their transcendence is elevated signifier. And utilitarianism fails. 1, induction fails. Single induction require power induction to prove a true, which is circular and falls apart. Second is infinite consequences. It might drop a pencil and results in an earthquake on your allowed because it means you can't use the guide ethics. 3 point weighability, you can't weigh between different pleasure chemicals in the brain, which means you don't know the consequences of action. 4th, the culpability, you don't know the ethicality of action until after you see the consequences, which means you can't use it to guide ethics. Permissibility would negate contextuality because the after burden is prove an odd statement that's a burden as per the resolution. I'll answer the Bowen evidence. 1, there's no warrant. It just uses intuitions to prove to prove a conclusion that pleasure is intrinsically good, but there's no warrant other that for that intuition other than just intuitions. It means it's entirely circular. 2nd, hijack given varying notions of pleasure which we desire, i.e. satisfaction from a job promotion is completely different from heroin from dopamine from heroin. We need to account for all affect that we desire as subjects. Yeah, that's the entirety of the Uto framework, the advantage top down, starting in populism. The first king touches entirely non-unique Democrats like Joe Biden literally introduced the Convo, which perpetuated the prison industrial complex, which is essentially modern slavery and always any issue of voter suppression and other issues from right-wing populism. They said populism spreads internationally, but no, it's super ethnocentric to think that people in the Philippines would care at all about Trump. Obviously, there's no reason to care, and context is super damning on the issue. They said populist leaders kill global climate action, but when there's a weak internal link, there's no way 21 right-wing populist parties, like the card says, would just fall apart if Trump loses. Second, non-unique, Obama never introduced any climate policy. The extinction impact is false for climate change. We've never gone near extinction in the past 4 years of Trump, which means we're not going to go extinct anytime soon from climate change there. Second, contention, democracy. China rises is inevitable. They've been rising for decades, ignoring U.S. attempts to stop this. And additionally, we linked here in the contention. China would rise faster under Biden, who would stop the trade war, which is preventing the growth right now. There is no extinction from nuke war. They read literally no scientific evidence for this, which is heavily negative on the case. 1, bunkers solved. People have been preparing for nuke war for decades. Second, it's empirically denied because you survive colder conditions than nuclear war, the nuclear winter and the ice age, and with less technology too. They also definitely linked to the Duluth scale. The idea that the state has obligation to put voting as a transcendent good overcodes subjects deviants desires. They talked about minorities and lower income people who are not wanted to vote. And then it's just like the state has to say what is right for them and overcode any of their deviant desires. They have zero method cards, which makes it super easy to develop. I'll read some cards which turn case. So for this is in the document. The solid majority cuts both ways. Compulsory voting would swing local elections in favor of the GDP and GOP. Goldberg 6-5. Some there's a reserve army of very liberal voters out there who measure all metaphor workers and regulators on Trump. Since we are just only theory, he constantly speaks in tweets about the violence of vast majority that are absolutely on the side to realize Democrats will be the sole protector of sole voter suppression and low turnout, but this simply isn't true. The local level turnout for school board elections is low, but not alone. Union members and allied bureaucrats have everyone in a local election. The share of electorate made of teachers and administrators would be equivalent of a rounding error. At the same time, dynamic and founded in a host of local matters decided the polls of special interest expect care because they've skin in the game. There's a solid majority that really speaks up in the ballot box. Compulsory voting fuels populism. Latin America proves. Jankra 19. The compulsory voting facilities allows oppressive populist leaders in the entire Latin America is an example of its stock considered the continent historically known as the epicenter of populism movement. The compulsory voting. A lot of the principles can be applied to other countries such as Argentina. Equal opposition can be popular. The cycle becomes a easier target for populists to catch attention of those who voted because of mandatory Bolsonaro use catchy sentences against corruption in favor of the rule to get elected in the United States. Only 50 to 60% of electorate vote to abolish the compulsory voting will reduce populism. Cut the card at populism. Yeah. I'm ready for cross.
Wait, where did you cut the card?
Populism. And I didn't read the last card.
Like, reduce populism, like that last line?
Yeah, like the very last line.
Okay.
Reduce populism.
Make sure. You good cross?
Yep.
What parts of the app does the alt disagree with?
Yeah, so the one is the alt disagrees as articulated by our link evidence with the fact that the affirmative resolution of compulsory voting essentially allows the state to place the idea of voting, the signifier voting, at this sort of elevated status as subjects decide not to vote for whatever reasons, for whatever desires. The 1AC uses the state to overcode these deviant desires to not vote and force them to abide to whatever the state desires. This is explained by Robinson evidence.
That's fine. Is death bad under the framework of the critique?
We don't say that death is good, but rather death is not something we should like actively like at all circumstances try to prevent. That was articulated by our Bow evidence indicates that death is not just like a binary of life and death, but rather just like a new sort of relation with subjects around you. You can still experience affective relations
How do we know
after you
that?
die.
How do we know we experience relations after we die?
Yeah, I think the card gives warrants. So we still have we still experience the purely mechanical laws of cause and effect and cause new relations. This is also scientifically proven.
How do they know this? Like, no one has been able to speak about death because they are dead.
Yeah, I was about to get further into the warrant. This has also been scientifically proven, i.e. we as organisms are made up of old organic material. These are just like new effective relations and not just like the end of everything. So that's like a scientific warrant. It also has a psychological or like a affective warrant, which is that like throughout every feeling in life we experience death, and it's not necessarily just like a binary of life and death because we constantly experience the affect that arises from it, which means it's not just like...
Can you give me an example of something the alt would endorse?
Sure. So the alt would endorse movements like Black Lives Matter, Batistas, which are all horizontal movements rather than vertical movements. So rather than like embracing like or like allowing the state to overcode subjects' desires through things like compulsion, we rather embrace our own affective...
the Black Lives Matter movements were like subject to like more police brutality, and we haven't seen like a ton of like change from them. Why is that enough to solve your impact? Yeah,
so I mean, one, I think that's like an empirical claim without an empirical warrant. I have to see that first. I think there has been multiple impacts out of it, such as the imprisonment of some of the people involved in like the George Floyd shooting, for example. So I'm not shooting, murder, for example. So I don't think that is entirely true, that there's absolutely no solvency.
Okay, then what about like the police brutalities that they were like subject to?
I don't know that's true. I think you have to read a warrant. I don't think it's true.
Okay.
If you want to give me a carded warrant in the one year that Black Lives Matter failed, then we can have that debate.
Okay. I was like the permissibility argument on independent reason to vote neg.
I guess you can classify it independent. I don't know what you mean by independent, but like it is a reason to vote negative.
Okay. I have like a second left. I'll take prep. I'll send the doc.
How much time do you have remaining?
2 minutes. Sorry, I saved in a weird place. The doc was sent. On your turn order. Or when you've gotten the doc.
I'm ready for an order.
I'm downloading the doc, but you can give an order.
Okay, perfect. It'll be the app in the order of the democracy advantage, the populism advantage, the util framing page, the T page, and the K page.
Wait, can you repeat that real quick?
Yes. It'll be the democracy advantage, the populism advantage, the util framing page, the T page, the K debate. Oh, sorry. After the util page, it'll be the theory page, and then T, and then the critique.
Sorry, theory is a new auth?
Oh no, the answer to the theory hedge.
Okay.
Is everyone ready?
I'm ready.
I'm good.
Yep,
Okay.
ready.
Firstly, so my timer was for 7 minutes. Don't want to give a 7-minute 1 AR. Low voter turnout means the 2020 election will be illegitimate. That causes electoral and regime illegitimacy that threatens the legitimacy effect of the U.S. government towards power vacuums that climate time will fill that escalates to nuclear cards, cause distinction. China on the line by line. China versus not inevitable. The fact that democracy checks it is their internal link evidence, and it doesn't matter if Biden wins or not. We don't take a stance on who wins the general election. Just that the election has to be legitimate. And yes, there's extinction from even if there's not extinction from nuclear war, it still causes a huge amount of pain and suffering. So, and they have not read any evidence to indicate that bunkers or no nuclear weapons still happen. And it doesn't matter if the GOP increases. Whoever wins the election is irrelevant under this advantage. It just matters that the election is legitimate in 2020 and no impact of populism. I'll do that on the second page. First, I'll say Biden won't solve for populism, which takes out any offense they have. The fact that Trump is an international spillover means there's no effect on South American populism. And on the framework page, pleasure and pain are intrinsically valid because I know pleasure is good for me. I have no reason to believe otherwise. For you, therefore, establishing an obligation for your ability to pursue pleasure. This can only happen by preferring extinction on the line by line. Death is not inevitable. And even if it wasn't, it still causes pain, which is net bad. And they have no warrant. We don't know what happens after death, which means you shouldn't vote on this. And it doesn't hijack our theory. It doesn't reflect the fact that pain is an intrinsic value, and causing pain is still bad. And on the abduction doesn't fail. Science proof there's a metaphysically sound unprecedented method of causality that works. And if there's not infinite consequence, we stop calculating at the point of disutility. And we can weigh things like body count and allow us to weigh between two differences of pain. And yes, culpability. You're only responsible for the consequences you intend, not all the infinite ones. And then we just stop the point of disutility and permissibility. It's not independent of the gain. This is the blip and the one and C. And you should not feel comfortable voting on it. And the structural advantage of being net, the time skew prove that you should not vote on permissibility. And the moment that there is a warrant, it talks about how it's an intrinsic value. And because I know pleasure is good for me, and I secretly act for, I seek pleasure means I should be able to help that for you. And on the hedge page, yes, we get 1AR theory. It's key to check one and see abuse. And we're not going to read anything. It's not an independent reason to vote negative. And T. interpretation A and the resolution of version 1 democracy lexicon debate used to mean 1 on place specification correct 11 you give the food impacts more much before I'll give them non poisonous food semantic of the following picture all could be through these methods of ways of doing and semantics are floor non ceiling our interpretation is grounded in semantics which leads to significantly more education debates but there's arbitrarily exclude the core of the topic and net benefits 1 is overlimiting there's only 1 app under their interpretation and 2 picks make increased price for inevitable it's better for the app specific next and generic and content but the app has zero recourse against picks under their interpretation and 3 neck prep explosion is good. It forces debates on something interesting in voting policy rather than different from each state. Otherwise, debates will develop into voting good, but our voting average is inconsistent with real world voting policy and use reasonability for its ways to top and arbitrary application of rules and on the standards purchasing is done that way. There's no internal link to pragmatics or semantically reasonable. We can still engage pragmatically. No jurisdiction. Judges vote for non-T apps all the time, which just proves that no limits. Functional limits checks. No one's running with the Canada India app, which just proves it. And AFCON is increasing. And then no TBD and will just the NC will just pick out of the country that's talking about, which means it's impossible to combat. And the critique versus framework or interpretation that the activation should be centered around what the plans are good. Yeah, that means we get to weigh the case that A's competitive equity and the interprets unpredictable moods or offensive voice class turn. Continue to provide the plan's fault to his education, helping to debate over coding. It produces conflict resolution. That's and the case turns and outweighs the critique. Extinction inflicts endless violence on anyone. Their alternative expedites the death of billions and forecloses the falsity for criticism to prove a 1% parents their theory is wrong. We do vote out even if they win death, and enough that they all results in tremendous global suffering as a result of unchecked nuclear war and the link. Frame your ballot through the resolution of material impacts. If you can explain how the all improves life for American citizens and the right to vote app and no link. The app is agnostic for voting on the state is capable of denoting the subject's desires in the app an example of reversing the control of the state, handing power back to the citizens who have been denied the right to vote previously. And the alt fails proliferating power cannot resolve the state's control. They still have power in the federal government and the fact that they are like Black Lives Matter movement. If you look at what happened like in protest, they were faced with police brutality, tear gas, and rubber bullets. To prove that any insurgency against the state and a protest just gets crushed. I didn't read any of the cards under the
I got it. 4 minutes of prep starting now. Was there anything exempted like on the K page? Like
no.
that wasn't in the doc? Okay. Any reasons to drop the debater? No, right?
Mm-mm.
No RV on you?
Nope.
Okay. Why is the K not material?
It just like what do you mean by the question?
You made the claim that the K is not material. Why is the K not material? What is the warrant?
I don't like I talked about how like you need to like explain directly how you improve like American citizens like who have the right to like get those rights back and like why that's bad.
Cool. Order will be K case. Case will be on the framing, then the democracy advantage that they went for. Is anybody not ready? There are no cards.
Can you just repeat that order really quickly?
K case. Case will be framing. There's a chance I won't go to framing, go directly to advantage. I'll make sure to say that. Then advantage. The second advantage.
Okay, I'm good when you are.
Do we have an overview on the critique? Does it require a new page?
Yeah, it'll start off with an overview.
Do we need a
which
new
you can just fill at the
page?
top of the K.
Alright, cool.
I don't think so.
You said K framing democracy, something like that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Alright. The next question of the debate is how subconscious desires are affected by the one you see. The Apps made macro level claims how politics operate, but insofar as they don't understand the subconscious layer of decision making which goes behind each and every ballot from each and every voter that should serve as a filter for all their offense, because voting is not intrinsic good proven by populist voters, but rather contingent on the desires in each and every voter. Thus, the conceded role of the ballot is to interrogate the desire. This is a prior sequencing question. All questions of the morality of voting. Here's the thesis of the critique. The state compulsion of subjects to vote overcoats any subject's deviant desires to abstain, displacing that signifier at elevated statics. This mimics the logic of fascism and transcendent truth positive of the state. This infiltrating subjects' psyches, pushing fascism the subconscious layer. Don't allow them to blow up tiny analytics inside of the one thesis. As far as thesis like clashes with it. Their framework argument about the role of the ballot is irrelevant. What would that the implementation of compulsory voting results in fascism, which just turns case which is relying on liberalism? But I'm going to answer it anyways. Counter-interpretation is an extra evil to challenge the abstract representation of plans complexity in a system of fascism. One is best for unlikely to actually become policy, but all of us should know how to operate within the oppressive system. The case is best to teach hatred inside of becoming critical intellectual stable of challenging systems of power that don't control position of power. Policy approaches can do nothing to challenge that of fascism. It's useless to discuss competing policy alternatives because of zero critical potential. The debate should be about competing intellectual stances, which is much more educational and turns their education argument. Second, assumptions are a vital part of policy making. Abstracting away from vital questions how the world operates makes less effective advocates, and cuts critical thinking, turns all the offense. We have to focus on micro level movements because that's the only thing we have control about. Their fairness argument. The K doesn't move the your method solves any time skew. When you read 6 minutes of the affirmative, it's reliant on policy making being good. You can just leverage that. Also, the affirmative is to defend their assumptions to win their offense, regardless of whether or not everybody care or not. So mooting the office is inevitable. Fairness is irrelevant in and of itself and talking about models of it because you can just do the same thing when you negate. The response is reliant on being more educational practice, so they need to weigh it versus the arguments. They definitely link to the critique, except for opposite end. The affirmative is a particular form of state action which creates violence by cracking down on the inevitable difference that constitute identity. While it's like the suppression of deviance, a link in response to fluid desires of subjects and the people decide not to vote. What is equal to the compulsory voting to do so. This particular signifier voting is elevated to the highest level, incorporating any deviant desires of the state. The deviance is renders subordinate to that of the state, and thus allows the state to control any instance of social production, maintain a monopoly on how people are to live. The stress case at a macro level, rather than strengthening the democracy and liberalism which they desire, they perpetuate totalitarianism, a system of government relying on overcoding desires and suppressing social production. They said that no link because they doesn't care about overcoding desires, but it literally overcodes desires. Otherwise, because this means they're in a functional double line. Either they claim the stake and overcode desire, which means they link to the critique, or they can't overcode desires, which means you vote negative on presumption, because otherwise they don't actually increase voter participation from non-voters, and they have zero solvency for the affirmative. This, which means they definitely link to the critique. Now, extending impact. This went cold conceded inside of this round. The votes for fascist leaders for Trump or Hitler are not out of confusion, but rather real desires for fascist leaders are understanding the world arises from subconscious desires to control any conscious recognition of reality. Fascist desires arise not from a belief system, but centered on fascism, but rather subconscious desire for complexity smoothed out by transcendent truths. Truths like the perfect Aryan male being representing the perfect human. This suppresses and eliminates all that deviate from this truth. Is it briefly proven by things like the Holocaust and Mexican concentration camps. The transcendent truths of the one is compulsory voting instantiation of the truth imposed by the state, enabling fascist desires. There's two implications to the argument. One, it turns case on a micro level, the suppression of deviance and elevated truth is placed for fascism because we desire our own oppression through our desire for complexity to smooth out. Second is the horizontal and drive to feel stable and eliminate deviance. We desire our own oppression through fascism as the opposite occurs, which kills value to life as you lose hope in the political and comes first because their impact focus begs question whether or not lives are worth saving. This means we turn case on the level of form and content because people on debate, including the people watching this round, will eventually turn against whether or not they should vote or not. And if they just vote and don't engage horizontal movements like the alternative, then they're never gonna actually do anything. That one conceded outside of the 1 and C. I'll answer extinction first here. They said extinction outweighs, but they literally conceded defense on case and said that they just cause a lot of pain rather than extinction, which means they have no weighing on extinction coming first. And additionally, I'll go to the Bow evidence on case which will turn this. They said you should frame the argument through material impacts. So one, we have a strong alternative link to materiality. Each and every desire co-opted by the affirmative would just result in fascism, which obviously always in turns case. Second, the opposite material. They literally don't understand balance. There's a difference between being vague and being material. We are more specific about micro-level movements and the desires of each and every person. This leads me to the alternative. Vote negative negation of politics, active desire. Alternative regards they reject the abstract reactive desire. Their liberatory desires and reaction to the state imposition. One where you favor or over resistance to form itself, it's a valid creation. Otherwise, the political strategies get diluted by those who we oppose and disappear. So does a strike. For example, rather than framing the protesters of Charlottesville as counter-protesters tied to Nazism and fascism, such as that they disappear, so they become revolutionaries, Marxists, philosophers, individuals who exist to bring their own meaning to the world and practice that disrupt the frames of oppression. This is completely distinct from the affirmative strategy. They said that it's completely distinct from the affirmative strategy. Especially a political active desire. Compulsory voting entails voting outside of one's own volition, desires for active rather in reaction to the state. This means that Altsolv's case or method of active desire allows a horizontal movements. This is empirically proven by like the Zapatistas in Mexico who have allowed for their own space, safe from the fascist government, the super populist government in Mexico. They said the Altos and Sullivan talked about Black Lives Matter, but one, their claim about Black Lives Matter is an empirical claim without an empirical warrant. They needed to give a court card actually warranting it. Second, we just defend horizontal movements in general, not just Black Lives Matter. We've isolated some other examples that actually work. Third, the Black Lives Matter did make changes. Their police reforms at local levels, as well as the arresting of murders of George Floyd. Don't just like vote like you should definitely err negative on this issue. They obviously Black Lives Matter did some stuff. Even if they go for this argument, just a defensive argument, you should vote negative on risk of office because overcoding desires prevents all resistance in the first place. They didn't actually make a perm argument, but that wouldn't actually matter because alternative would solve case engaging active desire the only way to break down systems of populism because instead of viewing citizens as one people unified by the state, which populism thrives upon, we embrace our difference and our own unique desires, which means there's no net benefit to the perm at all. Case. I'm gonna go for the Bow evidence because it went massively. Actually, I'll go to the advantage. They massively undercover the turn on the second advantage. They just said that it doesn't matter who wins the presidency. It just matters on the legitimacy of democracy. But the issue is that they conceded that Joe Biden would be better for China than China than Trump. This is empirically proven because because of the trade war. China rose a ton in GDP wise under Obama, but faced some decline under Trump, which proves the trade war actually works. Actually works. This turns case because this means that Trump would prevent China rise and prevent any single nuclear war in the future. Yeah, they don't actually access extinction. They didn't get to K enough time.
Okay, I have 2 minutes of prep left. Okay, it'll be the case on the order of like the advantage and then the like framing page and then the critique. Is everyone good?
I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yes, I'm good.
Low version 2020 election will be illegitimate. That causes a dissolution of the U.S. government, which will cause the Democratic backsliding vacuums that China will fill. The war will escalate and go nuclear. That outweighs because death is irreversible. They have not extended any indicts to the specific framing, so you should still operate under the assumption that death is bad, and the fact that the plan can solve huge amounts of death is still a reason to affirm. And the K does not turn the case. They misunderstand our advantage. It doesn't matter who wins the election. It just means that the election has a representation of all people in it, and people actually turn out to vote. That's the internal linkage that we go through, as evident by our Gardner evidence, and is a huge risk of case. They've conceded the impact and the entire internal link scenario, this Joe Biden stuff, and they've completely misunderstood it. Basically, there's no warrant for why Biden wins, or Biden wins now, or that Trump doesn't. They've not made any analysis on like the uniqueness debate of this question, and also we don't take a stance or don't care who wins the election as long as people are turning out to vote, which is what the internal link is about. And they have conceded that pleasure and pain are intrinsically valuable because I know pleasure is good for me. I have no reason to believe otherwise, viewed thereby establishing an obligation to preserve your ability to pursue pleasure. This can only happen by preserving existence. All values can be explained relative to pleasure, which proves that in the end, the only reason we want to follow our desires is insofar as they increase our pleasure on an individual level. They've conceded they didn't go for any of the utility index, and they've conceded that even that the death is like an intrinsic disvalue, and that experiencing it is bad. So if the F can prevent amounts of death via nuclear war, that is still a reason to affirm. And they've also articulated no reason why the micro level movements of the critique are better at solving for the impacts of the app than the plan itself. So you should not vote on the Octos case arguments. And yes, we should be able to weigh the case on the critique page. Even if we won't become policymakers, it's still good to talk about policy since it impacts every aspect of our daily life. And our interpretation solves all your offense. You still get to weigh the impacts of the critique just against the impacts of the else. Anything else would moot the 1AC. They've not, even if in fairness is important, debate is a game, and all arguments within are deployed for strategic purpose. So this is so it means that we need to preserve the fairness of the game, and they've conceded that the app is consistent with what the alt wants to do. The app increases representation of every person, and if they vote, that means that the government is representation of their desires, and what they want the state to do, which takes away any inherent bad properties of the state that the critique that causes the critique's impact. And you should not vote on presumption. There's huge risk of offense on the case page, which is not how you should settle your debate. And they've not done any impact comparison between their fascist leaders' impact and nuclear war. But we've done explanation of why nuclear war would kill everyone faster and more certainly than fascist leaders. And they also conceded that the alt fails. I don't need to read empirical evidence about what happened to Black Lives Matter. As someone who attended the protest, I can attest for the way that police use things tear gas and rubber bullets to hurt protesters with proof they can't solve.